Hey, we are about to get into a topic that I'm actually really going to enjoy going over, specifically because this is something I've found myself spending a lot of time on personally as we've been developing our Azure platform. And the more time I spent with it, the more I kind of realize its importance and I've become more familiar with it. And I am looking forward to sharing some of that knowledge with other people because I feel like it is a very confusing topic and it's something that can get very complicated very quickly. So, good. I'm looking forward to getting over some of the basics here. I will say that right now I am recording this next series of videos on Azure Policy as part of a class related to the AZ801, but I am also going to try and record these in a style that these videos are kind of standalone because I could see myself going over some more in-depth Azure Policy topics in the future, getting into some of the more development behind it, how to do maybe enterprise policy as code, and get into some of the nuances when it comes to developing your custom policies because it is a really powerful tool. It's a really powerful engine that Microsoft has built, but that comes with a lot of technical overhead and how to figure it out. So this section is going to be going over some of the basics. I've got it broken down into 4 topics here, and we're not going to we're going to avoid getting into some of those more complicated subjects, at least at the time being. So we're going to start by talking about some of the Azure platform management, and this is kind of a review what we should already know as we're getting into Azure, but we want to talk about how Azure is structured, so we know how policies can apply. We're going to talk briefly about how Azure resources are represented as code on the platform, which is kind of how policy interacts with it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about tagging, just as a reminder of what tagging is. The next topic is going to be an actual overview of policy, kind of what is Azure Policy, why do we use it, how is it set up, that sort of stuff. We're going to go over the basics of the different types of policy objects that exist and how they look in the portal. And then we are going to talk about how policies interact with the resource deployment cycle. Because when you deploy a resource, there's a whole series of steps that happen on the back end from Azure, and different policies appear at different parts of that process. So we want to know kind of where they apply. So we're going to talk about that. Following up from there, the next topic we're going to about is going to be actually policy management. I have these backwards, but we're going to talk about kind of the operational tasks of what it looks like to manage Azure Policy from the platform, and if that's your job, kind of what are the responsibilities you have doing that. We're going to touch a little bit on what I have recommended policy configurations listed here, but that's actually going to be more so what are some of the policies you might want to have in place, or what are the common scenarios that you start using Azure Policy for. That's a good one to start with because you're going to need something like a step to start building on as you get more and more into it. So talking about some of those recommended configurations will help kind of establish some starter steps for you as you're getting into your platform. And then lastly, for the policy management topic, we're going to talk about some of the difficulties you encounter when managing Azure Policy, because you will start to encounter them pretty quickly, but there are definitely solutions for that. And then we're going to wrap up the series of videos by talking about policy definitions and taking a more detailed look at what those are and how they're built. We'll review a little bit the difference between initiatives and definitions and some of the things you get with each that are unique. And then we're going to actually take a deeper look into the definition itself and some of the components that make up what a policy definition is and how they're structured. We're going to go from there to actually creating our own custom policy as a sample. And then we're going to talk finally about policy as code. Once we've seen what it looks like to write a custom policy, it starts to make more sense of why you might want to start thinking about managing all of your policy as code objects rather than using the portal to manage it, just like everything else with Azure. That's going to be the video that we're going to get into. So it's going to be 4 videos in this series, and I will post those as I go along. So looking forward to getting into it.